It's another episode of the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Jason.
I'm Kristen.
My name is Dan.
Cool. So, Kristen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So we usually like to get started by discussing the games we have been playing recently, and we always let the guest host go first. So what have you been playing?
Awesome. Well, I told Dan that Scott always sits in front of me when we play games, and I say that he steals my answers because we have married people mind meld, and he steals my answers before I can say them. And in the same fashion, he's gone before me on the podcast, and he's talked about my games. So to add on to Gloom and Superfight, which we did play over the weekend again, we got expansions for Easter. So Superfight, we've added, we had the nerd version, we've added the adult version, which sounds like it would be really sexy and naughty, and you're like, oh,
it does.
It kind of does,
adult
yeah.
version. But no, it's just slightly inappropriate things, actually. So
Okay.
it's, like an old person's rascal scooter.
Okay.
There's some sexy things in there, but mostly it's just kind of, oh, that's not very nice. So we had that expansion. We also had the locations expansion. So you'd have your superheroes and you'd argue for who's the strongest, and then you'd say, but you're on a pirate ship. So that was kind of fun. And then they also added in a scenario. So you might say, and the floor is made of lava or something like that.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Oh, this is like, so in the Superfight, just to clarify for listeners, you have like those characters, I guess, like superhero characters or monsters, and you add like different elements or abilities to them, and then you argue about which one would win, right?
Exactly, yeah. Right. And we've decided that we like arguing so much that instead of putting together your character, presenting it, adding another virtue, which is what you're supposed to do, and then arguing, we argue every step of the way. By the time we'd reached 4 points, which is how you win, is when one person has 5 successes, I was exhausted.
Yeah, it
I just
sounds
sat
horrible.
in my chair, I was exhausted.
It sounds like you guys have fun with it, but it sounds awful. Like, I don't, this sounds really terrible to me.
It's fun in minute quantities. So we played that, and that was really fun. And then Gloom, which is the card game about making your family as depressed as possible and then killing them off.
Love it.
Which is really fun, and actually really positive people have a great time with it. So we find that our family members who are normally like pretty cheerful people and don't want to role play really get into making people miserable and, going, and she was eaten by weasels. Has tended to be people's favorites. So the expansion for that one is called Haunted Houses or Horrible Houses or something.
Okay, yeah.
And it gives every family a house, and then that house adds qualities. So not only do their lives suck, you're ruining their house around them where it's haunted.
Yes.
It makes everything worse. So that's fun. But the big games that we played, actually on Friday, when I came over to Mandatory Fun Club, we'd split, and one table was doing Dungeon World, which is where you were, and then the other table did board games, which was really a nice change of pace. And we played Libertalia and Masquerade. Okay. So Libertalia,
and also Batman Love Letter, right?
And Batman Love Letter, right? Yeah. Batman Love Letter doesn't make my list. I don't really care for it. I know Steve.
Steve Steve's really fond of it.
I know,
do you like regular Love Letter, or?
Regular Love Letter's fine.
Okay.
I like it better. Something about Batman Love Letter just didn't really, I don't know.
I haven't played it, but I really love, there's something really cheesy about base Love Letter,
Mm-hmm.
like just the drawings and there's a silliness to it, like the princess and the countess, and the countess has very anachronistic hairstyle and stuff. It's just weird, right? And you just look at this game, you just kind of giggle and laugh at how stupid it is, but it's really, really fun, right? At the same time, I feel like Batman, I don't know, I feel like Batman would take away from that or something, but
yeah.
Wait, you're saying Batman isn't cheesy?
Well, this is not like Batman 66. It's straight up Batman, right?
I love my Adam West.
I was
Batman.
actually, I was picturing it as being old school Batman.
No,
that'd be cool.
90s
Yeah, I could get into that.
cartoon Batman.
Yeah, it's like cartoon Batman.
Yeah. So, but Libertalia was
yes.
probably the biggest hit of the night for me. Every player takes on the role of a captain, and you have great captain names. Like, my captain was Dirk Chivers. I was
like pirate captains?
Mm-hmm, pirate captains.
Okay.
I was captain of the Conquista. And each character has a pirate ship, and they have a crew of 30 people. And every player has the same 30 people. And there's a ship in which you place your card. It's just a flat 2D board that looks like a pirate ship. And on that ship, there's a space for 6 cards, and you're going to play 6 rounds. And below each of those cards, there's a holding bay for the booty that you're going to raid, right? And so the basic idea is that you will have 3 campaigns. In each campaign, there are 6 raids. So, and that at each of these raids, the pirates can collect a certain amount of booty, depending on how high-ranking they are or what special abilities they have. And so you start off off with one person, and it was the youngest player, which, of all the ways to decide who plays...
Oh, that's lame. It wasn't...
Youngest
there
player
should be
is
a more
really
piratey way.
Totally lame.
I feel like it should be like best pirate or...
If whoever has most recently violated maritime law gets to go first, that's what it should be, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Or does, best pirate, sayings or something.
Yeah.
But, so it was our youngest player, and he pulls 9 cards, and everybody gets the same 9 cards out of their crew. And each crew member has a different level ranking from 1 to 30, and they have special abilities. And you choose who you want to play to compete for this booty based on whether you want the booty or not, because not all booty is good. And
That's the truth, too.
Right.
Throw that out there.
And what you think the other players will play. So it's really, really fun, and there's 6 rounds in each campaign, and it's part of it is a memory trick of what have people played and what are they holding in their hands.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because you're allowed to hold back 3 characters from the first campaign into the next one.
Okay, yeah.
So an example would be that there was one card that let you, after every raid within the campaign, get a certain number of doubloons. And Grandma Wata, she was like a mermaid lady.
Grandma Wata.
Grandma Wata.
Very good. Okay, good.
And everybody had played theirs in the first campaign, so I saved mine for the second campaign, because part of her descriptor was that if anybody else had played Grandma Wata, they canceled each other out.
Okay.
So, in that way, you can reserve cards and save them so you don't overplay people. It was really, really fun.
Cool, good.
It was great.
Yeah, I was taking some pictures of it. I didn't get to play. I was at the Dungeon World table, but I was taking some photos of it, and the components seemed really nice. Like, the art was really good.
Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. We were saying we wished, the doubloons, we could keep them. The little copper pieces have a little bit of green, as if they've been in the water.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
The gold doubloons are really nice.
Now, were they cardboard?
Little cardboard tokens,
all right, yeah, okay.
But they looked like coins. In fact, they looked like they'd been stamped or embossed.
Oh, nice.
Really high quality
There's
printing.
another one of those things, if you did one of those silly Kickstarters where, like, the person's just selling coins, like old-timey coins. That's a
Yeah.
thing. That's a thing in the role-playing Kickstarter scene. There's another game you could use them for.
There you
So,
go. Exactly.
guys who buy those coins. Cool. Question about Libertalia.
Yeah.
Do each of the characters, all these different people, do they do something different? Is it like
They
variable
don't.
powers?
They don't.
Okay.
You'd think with different names that somehow that would come about, or
Yeah.
it would matter which pirate you had. It really doesn't. Each
Okay.
pirate has their own color.
Okay.
And so your crew has that color on their card, so you can tell who played which. And the only reason that it matters is that they make sure that if multiple people were to play the same card, each of those cards, while it has the same rank on a level of 1 to 30, there's a lower number on the card that's sort of their status position, and those go from, I think there's 6 players, so 1 to 6.
Okay.
So even if you and I both played the Marauder, who's a rank 20, for example,
Okay, yeah.
your status may be level 2 and mine might be a level 3, so my Marauder is more important.
Wow,
and that's
okay.
really the only distinction that's made, but every captain has the same number of status points, so it's just to resolve ties.
Okay, I see. So I guess the reason why I asked is because sometimes when you have games that have lots of like variability in terms of like cards or powers or special abilities, the person who like owns the game or who like brought the game has a huge advantage over everybody else.
Because they know the ultimate combination.
They know all the combinations.
Yeah.
They know what you could be holding.
Exactly.
Right? Was that the case in Libertalia?
No,
Okay.
it's a really even playing field because everybody's got the text printed on their cards.
Oh, good.
There's
Right.
there's no knowledge you have to have ahead of time about strategy other than the basic. You can hold on to some cards.
Right.
Don't play what you think other people are going to play.
Cool.
So it's really great.
Great. What about Masquerade?
Masquerade ended up being the funniest game of the evening.
Okay.
Because of
you guys were laughing a lot. Yeah.
the people at our table.
So here's the thing. Like, just to paint the picture for listeners, we had 2 tables going on. Kristen and several other people were at the board game table, and I was running Dungeon World. We were running probably the most like quiet and dark and grim like session of Dungeon World I've ever run. And so we're like being very like, I was doing like horror Dungeon World, and then like the other table was just like, ah, ha, 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 it was interesting. But
I don't know.
Well, it sounds like they have the spirit of Mandatory Fun Club a lot
Absolutely.
more than you.
No. Mandatory fun is when you are not apparently having fun, but you are having fun because it's mandatory.
I see.
See,
Okay.
you have to understand conceptually what that means,
So
Dan.
it's like the spirit of Christmas. You can't see it, but it's somewhere there inside. That's what's going on there.
Well, no, it's like if we all got together to play Twilight Imperium for 8 hours and it fucking sucked. but we all had fun because fun was mandatory.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I will say that even though it was grim, there were much shoutings of soup tureen from your table.
Oh yeah. We we're doing. It was very gallows humor, but it was a very, very dark session. Yeah.
Gotcha. So Masquerade ended up being hysterical, mostly because of the people at the table. We all have terrible short-term memory, and the game is entirely about remembering who has which card, and so we constantly had forgotten what our own card was or what other people's cards were. The basic idea is that you have a series of court figures, so king, queens, jesters, fools, those sorts of cards. Each one has a special ability, and you are trying to earn coins. I believe it's 13 for most players. There's one character who can have fewer. But you're trying to earn these coins and without looking at your card. On your turn, you can do three things. You can look at your card, but then you can't do anything about it.
Okay.
You can say what you think is on your card and claim the reward or action that card makes.
Okay.
And if you do that, other players can decide to call your bluff or not. And they can say, I don't think you do have the queen. I think I have the queen. At which point you turn them over, and if you were wrong, either the original person or the person who called the bluff, whoever was wrong ends up paying a coin to the courthouse. And if the person was right, they get to do the action. So there are scenarios when you had one person say, I'm the queen, and therefore I'm going to take my 2 coins, and multiple other people said, no, I'm the queen. They all flipped the cards over, and no one was the queen. So there's a lot of insanity. So you can look at your card, you can declare what your card is and take the action, or you can trade the card with another person or with a pile that's in the center. And when you trade, you have to take them underneath the table, shuffle them, and then put one back. The only problem is that we kept getting distracted, and so even if you knew which card you were taking, you took them under the table to shuffle them, and if anybody said anything while you were shuffling, you forgot which card was which. And there was no keeping track of it. So it was just absolute chaos and hilarity of people trying to remember what exactly we'd done.
Cool.
So, good fun.
So I guess the last thing you played was Vesna Thaw, right? Yeah. Vesna Thaw. I prepped for it, so I think I'll set it up. Vesna Thaw is a game by Nathan Paoletta, who famously wrote Annalise, which is probably his big game, right? And he's also done a lot of other things, but including the beautifully named Witness the Murder of Your Father and Be Ashamed, Young Prince. Very, very
really good.
Best name ever. Yeah, role-playing game. Vesna Thaw, though, is one of his micro games. It is about a post-apocalyptic, post-Soviet future where each player plays a pilot of a big, janky robot cobbled together from leftover parts and weapons. They are pilots in service to their community, their bunker community. They go out into the irradiated snow wastelands filled with giant mutant ants and other horrible monstrosities, and occasionally run into the other robots of the other pilots and fight them. They have to deal with internal strife within their community, and ultimately they are building up to going out in a blaze of glory. Like essentially, like the more work they do for their community, the more exposed to the radiation they get, and ultimately they die. And so hopefully they get something done during their short time for their community. Really good game. We've played it a couple times before, and it is funny. It's hilarious. It has this procedure whereby everyone at the table, like, you draw your robot and you draw its like weaponry and stuff, and everyone at the table gets to also contribute to that as well. So that's a pretty cool aspect of it.
Right. So you're like passing your character sheet to other people and they're drawing things on it.
Yeah.
Right?
You draw like the core of your robot, like a couple of little, elements or whatever. And then you pass it around the table and everyone else adds an element to it. So,
and makes it look real dumb, hopefully.
Right. Yeah. Well, so I just, I think this is a good example. I'm going to use my own robot as an example. My robot was actually just a cobbled together Chuck E. Cheese's, except it wasn't called Chuck E. Cheese's. It was called Sergei Stot's Centrally Planned Pizza Fun Palace. And Sergei Stot's Centrally Planned Pizza Fun Palace had, my first two elements were like a stage. It was a stage with like stage lights. And then the second element was like rocket thrusters. It was a big flying stage. I passed it around. Kristen added giant claw machine claws, like plushy claws,
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And then Farrell, really good touch on Farrell's part. Farrell added the kids eduslavement ball pit, which is pretty amazing.
Many orphans were cast into the ball pit.
There were lots of many Farrell irradiated orphans were cast into the eduslavement ball pit. And I can't remember what Rich added, but anyway, it was funny though.
He added Joseph Stalin's mustache.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Joseph Stalin's mustache was on the curtains, and I also had animatronic drones. So anyway, you draw your robot, and yeah, so every scene is you're either having like a color scene, a conflict scene, or an action scene. A color scene helps you like set up the other scenes, like for success. A conflict scene is like an argument with someone or something. And then an action scene is a fight. And then you can have a special kind of action scene called a robot fight, where you're fighting another player's robot or an NPC robot. And really, it's a pretty loosely defined, like in terms of like narrative goals, you're kind of left to just your own devices to kind of do whatever you think would be cool for your community. And you have like these really neat maps that come with it that like have like lots of like inspirational ideas for like what could be attacking your community or what could be a problem for your community. And I really loved it. It's a lot of fun. I have a couple little nitpicks with it, but otherwise, it's overall really, really solid game. What'd you think?
I really liked it as well. And I know I get I get heat for being the dice obsessed one, but I did like being able to play with my dice. But what was really nice with this was that it wasn't dice for dice sake, but that there was a strategy to what you assigned your dice to. So for listeners, the way it worked was you assigned D4s, D6s, and D8s to the various pieces of your robot, and that fours.
I think even D10s too.
D10s were the conflicts.
Oh, that's right. D10s were the conflicts, right?
That people presented, or hazards.
The hazards. Oh, yeah, you create hazards too, which is fun.
And so it comes down to a little bit of strategy because you use the D4s for the things that you think you'll use the most.
Right.
Because you're trying to go under a certain number. So small dice are beneficial. And I really liked the mechanic of that because there was a certain point in a robot fight where it was actually my robot versus yours.
Right.
And I realized that there was...
Golden Octopussy was her robot.
That's right. Golden-eyed Octopussy.
Golden-eyed Octopussy.
That's right. Sticking with my James Bond.
Yes.
And I realized there was a point where there was nothing my robot could do because of the way I'd built it, and I'd already used certain dice. It was really nice. I liked that mechanic of it.
Yeah, it was good. It's real solid because there's, in general, you want to make sure you're, the lower diced elements and the things that have like, the more chance you get to use lower dice, the better. The parts of your robot that have smaller dice, you want to use those more because they have, they have a greater chance of success. But like in a robot fight, for example, the more you use that stuff, the more likely it's going to get destroyed and you're not going to be able to use it later on, right? So then you're kind of stuck with the higher dice stuff. There's also this thing where you have to manage your community as well.
That was one of my other favorite aspects.
It's good. So you have like these 4 community traits: leadership, population, stability, and then technology. And they all represent kind of like different facets of the community, and stability particularly relates to the intersection between leadership and population. The more times you can get those things involved, you get a bunch of D4s, which is really good, like into your thing. But whenever you put something at risk in certain types of conflict, like they get lowered, right? Like there's a good chance you can have them lowered. And so it's a nice little risk reward thing kind of going on.
Well, and I just love the story element that comes with that. Yeah. That when you've suffered a loss in your leadership, having to narrate what happens to your leaders. I had idiots for leaders in our game, and they frequently mined their own people. And so taking points off of them because they kept blowing up was quite entertaining.
I know we don't normally do like what happened in our individual stories, but I do want to say, because I think it's important to understanding Vesna Thaw. So the hazards that you can create can be like physical hazards, terrain hazards, they can be monsters, or they can be like internal hazards, right? And so Rich, he had bureaucracy as his hazard. And so your character was trying to like get permission to go on some mission. And so he played the bureaucracy hazard. And so that forced you to narrate, like you had to fill out this like paperwork out. And I used my mines hazard, like actual landmines, to say that not only were the leaders having you fill out all this paperwork, but they were putting mines around their offices too, because they didn't want to deal with you. That's just how they dealt with problems.
Which is a proper bureaucracy.
It was very gonzo and goofy, but a lot of fun. So cool. Loved it. You played it, right, Dan?
Yeah. We played it a year ago or so.
Yeah. It was a good time. It's good. Yeah, it's a solid game. Awesome. Well, Dan, what have you been playing?
I had a pretty light week. So I guess the first thing I played was Murderous Ghosts, and that is by Vincent Baker of Apocalypse World fame.
Yes.
And it's actually powered by the Apocalypse officially. When you look through it, it's kind of tough to see the prints of Apocalypse World, but they're there if you look. The idea with this is it's a strictly 2-player game. You have 2 different books. There's an MC book and a player book, and they're kind of structured like choose your own adventure books, where there's numbers, and all of the MC entries are odd numbers, and all of the player entries are even numbers. So you pass the narration back and forth between the MC and the player. The player is an urban explorer, and they've been running through the sewers, and they wound up in like the sub-basement of some old abandoned factory. And something horrible happened there, and it's filled with remnants of violence and also ghosts who will all murder them.
Right, yeah.
The way it kind of works is it's like a choose your own adventure book, but they left out all of the details. So there's a few sort of main loops you go through.
Okay.
And initially, every time the player goes into a new room, the MC goes to his chapter that says, describe the room they're in.
Okay.
And then it gives you sort of a menu of things like if they try to leave, go to this page, or like if they investigate and find a clue, go to this page, and or like tell them to go to this page if they do certain things. And then they have to like answer questions like about the character, like what do you want to do before you die? And then they have to answer that question and then bounce the control back to the MC.
Okay, yeah.
The way the actual resolution works, though, is at some point they're going to run into ghosts, right? So they have to deal with these ghosts. And so you have this whole deck of playing cards. Every time they go into a new room, the MC draws a playing card. And that's to chart how close they are to finding a way out. But the player has a hand that's played face up on the table. And whenever they try to do something, they have to draw a card. And you look at the like sum total of their hand, kind of like a hand of blackjack. And there's good, bad, and intermediate results depending on what the total of their hand is.
Okay.
But they can ditch their hand at any time and start fresh. But you're never going to get the best result from one card. Because the best result is like 13 to 20. Or 13 to 21 gives you the best results. 4 to 12 gives you a mixed result. And 1 through 3 or over 21 gives you the worst result.
Okay.
And so there's a pretty interesting decision as the player, like, when should I ditch my hand? Because I'm like in the hot zone right here where things are going good for me, but there's always the risk that you're going to bust.
Right. Okay.
And then you get the terrible results. So it's much safer to kind of pitch your hand and just hope you don't get less than a 3.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of cool. So you can kind of like, there's some good tension, like rising and falling through the course of the game.
Yeah.
It's kind of easy to die.
Yeah, that's what I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that about it.
I was playing with my wife, and she certainly got murdered by ghosts, so it lived up to its name.
Yes,
but,
expectations met.
But every time the character goes into a new room, the MC draws a card, and when you get 4 cards, you flip them over, and as soon as the MC has 1 card of every suit in their hand, then it tells you, like, narrate an exit. And so then that's the next room they go to has stairs that lead to safety or something, and that's how they leave.
Okay.
But it's kind of interesting, like, there's some situations that were kind of weird because you're on this choose your own adventure formula. And so one of the core loops is like, there's a ghost here. And one of them is there's a ghost here who's doing his own thing. And so then there's ways that like, if they draw the ghost's attention, go to this page. And then it's like, now there's a ghost trying to murder you. So there's a list of about 10 ways they can try to deal with it. Like if they try to hide, tell them to go to this number. If they try to use violence, tell them to go to this number. And so my wife was trying to do things that were not kind of really covered in that menu, which made it
like
weird.
What? Just out of curiosity.
Well, so she ended up in a situation where there were 2 ghosts in the same room. And so one ghost was coming at her and she was like, well, the other ghost seems like it's in charge. Because it was like a henchman ghost and like a big boss ghost. And she was like, I'm going to yell out to get the boss ghost's attention because I think that I could like talk to him and get him to convince the boss ghost. To, like,
that wasn't an option.
Like, I was like, and I'm looking through this list and it is nowhere near being covered by this list. And I was like, he doesn't hear you.
Oh, so deprotagonized.
I know, like ghosts is the worst.
Yeah, but all in all, pretty fun. So
cool.
I liked it.
Yeah, I've always wanted to play it. We were just talking about this a little bit ago before we started recording. I never have any chances to play 2-player role-playing games, so I haven't seen a lot of these cool 2-player games, but I do want to give that a shot at some point, though. Sounds pretty cool. Awesome. And what else was on your list? Just Warrior Poet, right?
Just Warrior Poet, yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll do Warrior Poet together at the last then. I did, in addition to Vesna Thaw, I also played a couple of sessions of Dungeon World, one on Thursday and then one on Friday. It's the same campaign. It's part of my mega dungeon. It's going very well so far. The players are loving it. I'm loving it. Whenever I first start a Dungeon World campaign, I'm always very, very like revved up by it, like it's exactly what I want to be doing at that time. And that'll last about 15 sessions. It'll carry me for about 15 sessions before I get tired of it, and I'll change the calendar up completely, and then we'll eventually go back to Dungeon World. That's been the pattern so far. But I'm loving it right now. It's great. The tone of this campaign is it's got a nice like thick layer of like traditional fantasy tropes, which I like. Like, it's very well. We have no elves. We have several dwarves, though. Several dwarves, several halflings. Well, there's lots of players over the course of the multiple nights that we do, but I'm leading up to Death, Frost, Doom and Red and Pleasant Land, which are those like kind of more bizarre OSR scenarios.
Right.
And so I'm starting to kind of like, I'm setting up this like, there's this like level of surreality underneath all of it, which I'm really enjoying. That's kind of underpinning it. And I've kind of set it up in such a way that it doesn't really matter when people slot in on these sessions. Like, they get to experience like a part of it, no matter, they get to experience just a little bit of it here or there or whatever. There's not like because it's just a great big mega dungeon, there's not like a real strong like plot, right? It's mostly just about like exploring this dungeon, and like there's several different little like subplots or like little things going on, but like they're all pretty like cabined off and isolated from each other, and I'm enjoying that part of it. And another thing I like about it is I like the fact that because the players are mixing between the sessions, and because some people are going to be joining us later and some people are not here for every week, not everyone is getting the full story, and I dig that. Some players, like, there's some players who are going to get a lot of the story, and some who are going to get like just part of the story, and I want to maintain that level of like unknown and mystery. I'm really into that right now, like just this sort of like mysterious lore and like a story that you don't necessarily know exactly what's going on, and so I'm kind of digging it. It's been a lot of fun.
Cool.
So that just leaves Warrior Poet. Right?
I think so.
The grand experiment of Warrior Poet. I'm going to let you set it up.
Okay.
Can you do this in haiku?
Can you?
No. No, I think that is a solid negative. But
we've had so much practice, though.
That's true. We did write a lot of haikus.
Yeah.
Warrior Poet. This was a game from Grant Howitt's Patreon a while back. It is about heartbreakingly beautiful, sort of, I don't know.
It's like Japanese,
sort
Chinese.
Of, yeah, it's sort of some blend of Japanese and Chinese, like Asian warriors who are heartbreakingly beautiful and fight in beautiful ballets of flashing blades in the moonlight, and also write beautiful haikus
for the immortal Moon Emperor. Right. What's his name? Or the
immortal Ghost Emperor.
Immortal Ghost Emperor who
cares only for haiku. It's the only thing that lets him feel.
Love it so far.
I feel like he and the Shadow Emperor from the last game,
the Silent Emperor,
Emperor,
yeah, the Ghost Emperor and the Silent Emperor, they should get together.
They really should.
They just insist on being entertained.
Yeah. But the big thing in this game is you have these beautiful warriors, and you are having duels with the other players and all of this, and you're trading back and forth narration where it's like, I'm running across the tops of the bamboo forest and slashing at you, and the other guy is jumping on clouds to escape and shooting his gun, because you also have guns. Beautiful guns.
You get to describe the gun too.
Yeah. Shooting his gun at you, and then at some point you're like, and I begin to write. And then each of you write the first line of a haiku, and you give them to a player who is playing the part of the immortal Ghost Emperor to judge and decide which haiku is better. Whoever is deemed to have written the best haiku line gets a bonus die, and then you move on and you describe more of the duel, and at some point someone says, and I begin to write, and you write the second line of your haiku, which is then judged and awarded bonus dice, and so on for like the third line as well. And then you roll and see what happened, and then whoever gets to decide what happens, whoever gets narrative rights, also has to write a haiku
they have to write
to
another
describe
haiku.
what happens. So lots of haikus
are getting written. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, so that was a good description of it. What did you think? This is the second time we've played it. We actually went. If listeners are curious, we've posted on Google Plus about this the last couple of days, like with a lot of fairly extensive thoughts on mechanically in terms of like of what we think of this game. I'd maybe like to just keep this like kind of more like just big picture, like in terms of how it went vis-a-vis the last time we played.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it went objectively better than the last time.
Well, because we finished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the game takes place over the course of 4 seasons. You start in spring, you end in winter, because warrior poets are like some sort of like beautiful butterflies where they are only alive for a year. They're only relevant for a year before they are killed in glorious combat or fade into obscurity as new warrior poets rise up to replace them. So you have only a year to make your mark. And the first time we played it, we had only about 3/4 of spring to make our mark, because that's how far we got before we were like, I can't do this anymore.
I'm done. Yeah. But we did finish this time. But I think we also gave ourselves, we did a little bit of house ruling, right?
We did.
Yeah.
Well, really only one major change.
It was a big one, though, right? Yeah. So the major house rule we made, I don't remember whose idea it was, but we decided at some point that we were going to put a time limit on like how quickly you had to get your line of haiku written.
Yes.
That was our great downfall in the first time we tried to play. It was taking forever. Like, the first fight was so long because we were just like taking forever to write the haiku. And we put a 1-minute time limit on the haiku, and I think it worked out really well. It felt good to have that pressure of like getting the haiku written. Yeah.
And there were a lot of times where people just wouldn't have a haiku.
Yeah, sometimes you just like, I couldn't get it done.
Yeah, that line just didn't happen. So you are just not in consideration on that one.
Well, and we decided that that time limit on the haiku makes it feel more like a duel. Yeah. It gives it more of a duel-like quality. And so it was really good. And, Grant Howitt chimed in on our Google Plus conversation and, saying that he'd like to revise the rules at some point. And I think that's probably a good idea because the game's got several major problems, but easily fixed. Like, they're the kinds of things that I think would be a pretty easy fix in terms of like,
I think most of them.
Yeah. And so, and that was one of the things, like, I think, it seemed like he was really happy with that idea of like the 1 minute timer on the line, because he said that like one of the problems he had with it was it feels cumbersome, right?
Yeah.
And so
But I don't think it did this time. I think the flow in the actual duels was really good.
It was good.
Everything outside of the duels, less good, maybe.
Yeah,
But I mean, the duels are the important thing, right?
Right.
And so one of the things that we were talking about when we finished was, I think you sort of accused me of having a blind spot for this game, and
maybe a little bit, maybe.
Like forgiving a lot of like pretty big flaws. But I think the one thing this game does really well is it does something that a lot of games don't really do, which is it makes me feel really smart sometimes. Like, when you're like trading the narration in the haiku duels, and then you start to write and you have like the perfect haiku line.
Right.
It makes me feel really clever when that happens, and I feel like a beautiful samurai warrior. So
nice.
It does that.
Yeah.
And I think like I can forgive a lot of other things because that feeling is awesome.
Yeah. No, it's mechanically it's got some kludginess to it, and we've covered that in Google Plus, but on the post. I do respect the sort of like artistic ambition of this game, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's beautiful.
Yeah. I'm really into like what he was doing with the game. So I'd love to see a revised version. I think that'd be really cool.
From what it sounds like, it sounds like this game adds to the balance, or this sort of balance aspect of RPGs that sometimes can get lost in the same way that Vesna Thaw does. That Vesna Thaw is a very humorous RPG.
It is,
right?
Yeah.
And if all you played were funny RPGs, then it would sort of lose some of its charm.
Yeah.
But that when you have a variety of action-packed RPGs and humorous RPGs and artistic RPGs,
I think that's right. Yeah.
That creates a more complex and more engaging world to play in.
I agree completely. It definitely has a different flavor for sure. Mm-hmm. Its emphasis on like beauty and we were doing a pretty good job of not like shitting on the tone. We were like being like. We were aiming for beauty. And so, that was cool. That's not something we do all the time. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Let's go to the next segment. So our next section is Giving Me Life. As always, this is where we take a few minutes to discuss things that are not necessarily related to role-playing games. I think I'm going to start, if you guys don't mind. Yeah. The thing giving me life this week is, so our friend Farrell, he shared on Google Plus an article that was in the video game website Destructoid. It was actually a community forum written article, like just some fan wrote it, but it got promoted to like the main page because it was really good. So this article is about this player's interpretation of the video game Dark Souls. He makes a very strong case that Dark Souls is actually an allegory for the experience of someone suffering from Alzheimer's disease. And so I'm not going to go into a lot of the details, and I think I'm probably just going to end up posting a link to the article on the Google Plus post so that people can go read it. But I was very affected by it because I've known people who've suffered from Alzheimer's disease, and the case that this guy makes is really, really strong. And so the article is great. Everyone should go read it. It's very, very powerful and insightful and just really interesting. The broader point, the reason why it's kind of given me life is this has been kind of a theme of mine for the last few episodes that people may have noticed if they're astute listeners, but I'm really into this idea of like narratives that are not clear, like they have like a hidden meaning and mystery and like and a sort of like cryptic quality. And Dark Souls is the classic example of this, right? Like Demon Souls and Dark Souls are all about that, like this, you know, they don't front load the lore, you know, like it's all very just mysterious. And I like that people are able to read into the lore of the game whatever they wish, right? I think that's pretty cool. It's like watching a good movie in that regard, like, you know, like Mulholland Drive or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. Pulp Fiction or whatever. And so yeah, that's given me life. It's just I've been thinking about it a lot, and the article's really good. I'm going to post a link. So
cool.
Kristen, what's giving you life?
So two things, super quick. Agent Carter. Are you guys watching Agent Carter?
I am not. No.
I feel like I tried to watch the first episode or something.
It gets better.
Okay.
It does.
That's good to hear.
Because I'm very bad about letting things build on my DVR, and I watched the first one, and I was like, this might go somewhere. I'm not quite sure yet. Mm-hmm. And so I let them save and build. And I think we're about 6 or 7 episodes in now, and it's really good. I really like it. It's really kick-ass, and I'm loving both the nice 1940s and, you know, going into the 50s gender, like, oh, go make some coffee, Peg, you know.
Right, yeah. You silly woman.
Well, and then you like jump cut and she's like kicking a man in the face, and that's awesome. But it's really nice, you know. They also play the subtlety of, there's a character named Sousa who is trying to figure out who this woman is who's doing all these things behind the scenes, and the subtle interplay between he and Peggy, and then spoiler alert, but I'm behind everybody, so it shouldn't be a spoiler. When he finds out that it's her, that the interactions between them is really nice. I really like the actor who, and of course it's, you know, it's Joss Whedon, and he loves the same actors over and over again. So he's from Dollhouse. Anybody who's seen Dollhouse would have seen him before. This is really, really, really good.
Cool.
The other thing that's giving me life is Pinterest fake ice cream.
I don't know what that means.
So,
I have no idea what that means. I saw it in the notes, and I was like, I have no idea what that means.
I will preface this by saying that in general, Pinterest, usually I'm pretty good. About 3 out of every 4 Pinterest tries on like a new recipe or a new thing tend to go well. Yeah. This morning was not a good example. This morning falls into the other cooking wonders. Like, Pinterest has all these ideas where you're like, this is covered in cheese and made in fat, and this sounds delicious. And it usually is. It's usually like freaking fantastic.
Right.
But anybody who's seen photographs of the Gauntlet at gatherings will know that we have a kind of a type. Not everybody in the Gauntlet fits our type, but it's
tall and overweight is what we've established already. Right.
Because I'm short, so there you go. But we've taken to calling ourselves rotund Americans from time to time. So, you know, Pinterest has these things where it's like, a luxurious smoothie with chocolate and raspberries, and it feels sinfully delicious. And
sounds good to me.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. It was toxic. It was absolutely awful. But so there's this thing on Pinterest which is fake ice cream, that you like freeze fruit, like freeze a banana, you freeze some strawberries, and you pulse them in the food processor until they get creamy and make like a fake ice cream consistency.
Right. Yeah.
So the planning and production of fake ice cream has been like on my mind over the weekend.
Okay, very good.
And I will have to let you know how it turns out. But we shall see. So it's stupid, but yeah, Pinterest fake ice cream is giving me life this week.
I'm loving it. So, I love a frozen banana.
Yeah,
I mean, that's really good. Yeah.
So we'll see. Should be good.
Cool.
So awesome. I thought that was going to be like fake food, like the food porn style pictures, right?
No, I like food too much for it to be fake.
Well, there's this YouTube show, and it's called The Catering Show, and it's these 2 Australian comedians who do this shitty cooking show, and they did a food porn episode where the ingredients, they like post the recipes, and it's like the ingredients are like shitty burnt cupcakes, but that doesn't matter because you're not going to see them. And then it's like a tube of caulk and a caulk gun, a PVC pipe and stuff to just like pile the frosting on, because like no one's actually going to ever eat this. They're like hot glue gunning things.
Nice.
Isn't that illegal? I think there was a law passed saying that if you were going to advertise food, it had to be made out of real food.
That might be a thing,
but they're not advertising it,
That's
right?
true.
So,
and it sounds like they're not Americans. So
yeah, no.
They don't have to follow that law.
Exactly. Who knows what goes in Australia? So
bunch of heathens.
Exactly.
Non-Americans in America do have to follow our laws, though.
Absolutely.
Just most of the time. Yeah.
That's my legal education for you guys. Just so you know.
Thank you.
Unless you're a diplomat.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And you have special envelopes.
Right.
It's not as like universal as people think, but yeah. Like,
well, if TV's taught me anything, it's that unless they trick you into getting on a boat and going 3 miles offshore, you're safe from anything if you're a diplomat. So
I'm just saying I'm a really boring person, but I want a diplomat's envelope to just put random crap in and be like, no, you can't look in there.
Isn't it always like in political
envelope.
thrillers? Isn't it always a diplomat who commits the murder or whatever? Yeah, because they
They can never get in.
Because you could just commit murder, right? If you're a diplomat.
Yeah, I mean that's true, right? That's
Isn't
the way
that
the
what
law
they
works.
do for fun on Saturdays? Just pop people off.
Cool. Dan, what's giving you life?
Okay, this week what's giving me life is shitty movies that are actually surprisingly good. So I feel like this is a thing that's happened more recently, because it used to be just shitty movies were shitty and they were bad because they were poorly paced and they had terrible acting and all of that. But there's kind of an appreciation has grown for like low budget movies that are just shitty because of the limitations of their budget. But you can tell that the people who are making them are actually pretty talented.
Right. Yeah.
So the ones that recently I've seen that were pretty amazing are, the first one was called Zombievers, which actually, Jason, you're the one who turned me onto this.
I still haven't watched it either. Yeah.
You should.
I need to.
It's pretty great. So, I mean, it's a spoof on the kids go to the cabin in the woods, right?
They go to the lake thing,
right?
Yeah.
And then there's zombies who are also beavers who bite them and turn them into zombie beavers.
Right, yeah. And I always like to point out, because it's so amazing, these zombie beavers, when they bite the kids, they don't just give them zombieism.
Right.
They give them zombie beaverism.
Yes.
Right, yeah. So, like, they grow... Did you say they grow, like, big fleshy tails?
They grow giant, like, wet, fleshy tails that they slap around. Yeah, it's fantastic.
And, like, big buck teeth.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's real good.
Do they want brains or do they want wood?
Oh yeah, what's their goal? What's the motivation of the zombie beaver?
They never exactly spell that out. They want to murder people and turn them into zombievers.
Very good,
seems to be the general idea.
The thrust of it.
Yeah.
Good.
They want to increase their numbers for
very good.
For Zombievers 2, I suppose. We'll find out what their ultimate goal was. But also, Netflix apparently has figured out that this is my jam now. They've been really hounding me to watch Wolf Cop, which is kind of a like weird take on Teen Wolf if it were an R-rated movie.
I love it. Wait, which Teen Wolf? The old
like
Teen
the
Wolf?
Old Michael J. Fox Teen Wolf.
I only care about the Teen Wolf with beautiful hairless
No, this is
the
Teen Wolf with like shitty wolf masks and wolf gloves and things like that. Yeah. So this is about a shitty cop who gets kidnapped by a cult of lizardmen and turned into a werewolf, but because he is fueled by donuts and liquor, he is unable to be contained by said cult, and he keeps his wits about him while he's a werewolf, so he's able to do his cop stuff in full werewolf after the transformation. This has the most disgusting werewolf transformation scenes because his skin just sloughs off. It's amazing. Yeah. It's real good if you like just gross transformation scenes, but they also have like amazing 80s style montages of like the werewolf in a body shop, like welding things to his cop car to turn it into like a wolf car.
Wow.
And this incredibly long, sort of uncomfortable scene, like a sex scene with the wolf cop and this woman who's dressed up as Red Riding Hood that goes on for much longer than it really should, to like with like soft Cinemax style music playing in the background. It's a very tender scene between this dude in full wolf getup and a woman dressed as Red Riding Hood. So Wolf Cop.
When
you said welding, I expected there'd be like flash dance, dancing. That would have been much more entertaining.
Yeah.
I want to see Wolf Cop.
She's
dance.
a maniac.
Yeah. Perfect.
Lycanthropic maniac. Yes. And he's dancing like he's never danced before. So, I don't. That sounds really fun. I don't like my werewolves that way. Future producers of lycanthropy based movies and TV shows, werewolves should be hairless, except just on their eyebrows and the top of their head. They should always be taking a shower, and they should be beautifully, beautifully sculpted. All right.
Yeah, like real wolves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So, just
great.
little consumer feedback there. All right. Cool. Next segment. So for our topic today, we wanted to discuss role-playing games and the youth of America, young people, young children, youths, and role-playing games. So we're going to be doing this in kind of two parts. The first part, Kristen has a story that she wants to relate to us, and it's going to be awesome. And then the second part is we're going to talk about some games that we think would be great for young people, like non-traditional RPGs to introduce to younger folks. So, Kristen, you've been involved at the school where you work in a gaming club, right? You set it up and you kind of monitor it as you're like the chaperone or whatever, right? Of the gaming club.
I am their host, sponsor, and sometimes censor. Yeah.
Good. Yes. Well, so I'm curious about that. So, like, how'd that get started?
It started. I won't say what school I work at, so that we don't get any creepos showing up at the door.
Idea, yeah.
You know, not that
I'm here for the RPG club.
Exactly.
I heard you're playing Dungeons and Dragons.
I know our listeners are not
like
creepers,
that guy.
but
Okay, it's like that guy. You know who you are, listener. You know who you are. It's like that guy who's like at the game store playing Pokemon with a bunch of 10-year-olds, right? There's like a table full of 10-year-olds and a 45-year-old dude playing Pokemon. I'm just saying. That's real creepy. So we don't want that guy to show up.
self-awareness is important.
Yeah. There's a general lack of it in our community, I'm afraid, but yeah.
So I won't say where I teach, but I teach high school. And I started working at that school last year, and it didn't take very long for me to be outed as a complete and utter nerd to my students. At the previous schools I'd worked in, it really didn't come up because I taught in one school, in an inner city school, and so that was not a focus or priority. But pretty quickly, my students figured out that I knew about Star Wars, and I read fantasy, and I loved Doctor Who, and all sorts of other things.
Were they like, tell us about the first time you saw Phantom Menace?
No, because they're all really snobby, and they hate those movies. I have good little nerdlings. And so part of outing myself is that we divided in class up into groups or something, and I was trying to choose people, and in traditional teenage fashion, they're kind of being like stubborn and like, oh, I don't want to go first or whatever. And so I was muttering to myself as I was rooting through my drawer. I was looking for some dice because I used to. I'm gonna get stuck as the dice lady. But I used to keep a box of.
You are the dice.
I know,
it's true. It's true. Yeah.
But I kept a box of polyhedral dice in my desk because it's really great for group dynamics, for making groups and choosing people and things like that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I was muttering to myself that like, I wish I had a D8 because this would make these things really easy, and some little nerdling ears.
Listeners, a D8.
It's an 8-sided die.
8-sided die.
Yeah. Some little nerd ears perked right up, and they were like, oh, she knows about dice. And so it wasn't within a couple other days that I had, or a few days after that, I had a student show up at my door, extremely GT, extremely socially awkward.
What is GT?
Gifted and talented.
Oh, okay.
Gifted and talented.
Oh, I was that. I didn't know I was called GT.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
You got to know your label, Jason.
I didn't know that.
So extremely socially awkward, and he approaches in his very serious tone, and Ms. Davis, I'm aware that you are familiar with the role-playing games, and that you are also familiar with many things of the nerd world, and I was wondering if you would mind if I played D&D in your room and brought some friends with me. And this is actually pretty close to his tone of voice.
That's good, yeah.
Yeah, he's great. And so I said, no, come on, he said, we used to have a teacher who let us play in his room, but he grew tired of us, and I was wondering if we could meet in your room. Right. So I said, yes, absolutely, come on in. And so they started meeting in my room and sort of getting things together and thinking about playing and looking at character sheets and things. And originally they didn't want to actually be a club. They just wanted money. They wanted access to D&D Insider account because of the character generators.
Oh, okay.
Because they are 4E players. That is what they love. They want the ridiculously complicated characters of like multi-races and multi-classes. I want a dragonborn sword mage with blah da da yada yada yada. Dragonborn.
That's not a real race.
So they wanted a D&D Insider account, and they didn't have any dice, and because they were little newbie nerds, didn't have any dice or playmats or things like that. So
I just want to point out, I've seen these kids like at Barnes and Noble. I've seen these kids like they go to the Barnes and Noble. They are like they're just getting the books off the shelves and like reading through the books, but you can tell they can't afford it, and so they have to like put it back.
Well, the funny thing is that that my school, most of the kids in my school are stable to well off. So it was that they didn't have them like on campus, or they had parents who weren't really inclined to buy them for them yet.
Yeah.
So it starts with that, like we want to be a club so that we can do fundraising so that we can get these things. And so they put together a proposal, or actually I helped them put together a proposal talking about what D&D does. And, the name of the club was going to be RPG Club, Role-Playing Game Club, and put in the description about D&D and RPGs and all that stuff, and, storytelling and being a community and all that other good stuff.
Right, yeah.
And we don't hear back on our application for a while. And so I go and I ask, and my principal, who's very, very nice, says, well, I need to think about it for a little bit more. Come back and talk to me later. So I come back and talk to him, and he gives me the application, and on the application it says that officially the reason that we're being denied is that our club does not show academic merit.
Okay.
Now I have to point out that our campus has a Super Smash Brothers club. That's all they do is play Super Smash Brothers. We have an anime club.
Super educational.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
So that's the official reason. But the unofficial reason, he tells me as he hands me the paper, is that he's really concerned about, he did some research into this D&D thing, and he's really concerned about what he's read about Satanism and suicide.
Oh my.
Wow.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
I have these chick tracts you should take a look at.
Yeah, he bust out Dark Dungeons. And
I was really, really taken aback. I didn't think that anybody still believed in that stuff.
2000, this would have been 2014, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I know.
That's crazy. Wow.
So they got rejected, and then they like sort of got a fire under them because they were like, what do you mean we can't be a club? And just righteous indignation.
Especially if there's a Smash Brothers club.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, come on.
Right.
Yeah.
So the entire rest of the year is them telling the other sophomores about how they got denied and about how unjust this is. And by the end of the year, people are
fight the man.
Exactly. Yeah. And by the end
Rage
of the
against
year,
the machine.
I have other students going, well, the students in D&D club telling me about the students in D&D club who are being unfairly denied their rights. And I'm like, I'm their sponsor. I know, but it's made its way around. So this year they chose to reapply. And this year they had several things going on in their favor. One of which was that I was extremely naggy. Very nice.
This school year. So it would have been last September or whatever, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm a very nice nag. I'm very, very nice and polite about it, but I'm persistent. The other thing that helped us out is that I'm on the executive PTO board this year, and 4 of our parents are parents of D&D playing kids. Half of the PTO board is really upset that their kids can't have a club. It was a huge selling point for us.
Good, yeah, that's
the
good,
other thing that made it work was that we emphasized that it was all about storytelling.
Okay.
And community building. And dearly departed Rob had donated a whole bunch of figurines that he'd bought, and they were painting those, so that was creative outlet through painting.
Oh, I remember what Rob, before he died, one of the last things he did, it was a couple years ago, I guess, but he bought
hundreds.
He said the worst mistake he ever made of his life was backing one of those like Kickstarter things.
The Reapers.
The Reaper miniatures. Yeah.
Yes.
He said, worst mistake of my life ever. Like,
he had
what do you do with all
case
those
and
fucking
everything.
miniatures? I know. What do you do with them? Yeah.
So they've been painting them, and then the final sort of cherry on top of the cake is that they rename themselves from RPG Club to Interactive Storytelling Club.
That's really good.
That's pretty good.
And that ended up being the Band-Aid that made it all okay. And they finally got approved, and they got to do fundraising and all of those things. And so they're finally a club. And now what had been sort of a casual get-together sort of thing, now that they're an actual club who has actual responsibilities, they're having some struggles.
I was going to ask, what are the challenges? I mean, it sounds like there was a little bit of a challenge getting the club set up or whatever, but what are just I think what I'm interested in finding out is, because I don't interact with youths, I don't have any reason to, but I'm still curious, what are the difficulties of this, I mean, guys, I gamed when I was a kid, but it wasn't like a formalized club thing, right? And it was it was just my friends, right, that I was the dungeon master for. So I'm curious about the dynamics and stuff.
So part of the problem is that the core group that started off last year, they were sophomores, and they had a couple of freshmen who were interested in playing, but who they really didn't include. It was a very, very small group. And that when this school year started off, I sort of made a point that you need to include these new sophomores now that, they're juniors, and you need to have more people playing, and you need to keep this group going. Well, they're very segmented in that the juniors only want to play with the juniors, even though they...
It never ends.
It never does.
It never ends.
Even though
it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Right. They think they're being nice and inclusive, but you can tell it's not really working. So there's that. The other problem is, they're very, very busy kids. Our kids take a lot of AP classes.
Sure, yeah.
And so they play during their lunch break, which our school has a longer lunch than most. We have 50 minutes, which is really nice. So they play during that lunch period, but it's not a lot of time to actually get a story going, get everybody together in one place, get a story going. People are, trying to work on homework while it's happening, trying to eat their lunch. It's really hard. The other thing that they're really bad about, and that I've gotten on their case about quite a few times this year, is etiquette. Gameplay etiquette. So listening when your DM is speaking to you and trying to set a stage for you, don't turn to another person and talk about what happened on Saturday.
Right. Yeah.
And if your homework's done, don't be on your computer when somebody's trying to do something. It's really hard to get things rolling when everybody's talking and not listening and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
In addition to that, they are really, really stuck on 4E D&D.
That's what they love. They found it. They love it.
They did. Yeah. They tried 5E and
5E wasn't doing it.
Nope, they'd let it go. They really like 4E, but the problem is that is a drawn out, long campaign process, and they just don't have the time for it.
I have to imagine there's something to be. It's probably because 4E is probably more like a board game, right? I mean, it's got those strong board game qualities to it.
They like the mechanics of the minis and moving them on the playmat and, measuring out your spaces and things like that. They also really, really do like the intense character creation and the high level of personalization and all of those things. They love that process. Yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, is this, do you guys think you're going to be able to keep it going? I mean, do you have are there students, the younger ones, are there other people who are being groomed for leadership positions?
That's our current problem is that the older ones have kind of scared the sophomores off. They didn't do it intentionally, but
tiny little grognards,
little grognards in the making.
In the not including it, I think they started to just feel unwelcome. So part of the project next year is going to be, because they're going to be seniors and they're going to have more people in. Yeah. And if you ask them about new membership, they're like, we don't want more people. We like things.
We like our group.
Because again, they didn't really want to be a club. They just wanted t-shirts and money.
Yeah.
Just wanted t-shirts and money. So we're going to have to do some work on getting the younger kids in.
Yeah. Well, cool. Awesome. Well, so, that was good. That's very interesting to hear about. I thought we should also talk about, this might be, one of the things you mentioned was they're really only interested in playing 4E.
Right.
This sounds like that's just that specific group of kids. I mean, I would like to suggest, that there are games out there that might be a good fit for youths that are not traditional. They are not traditional role-playing games. They are not Dungeons and Dragons. They are not Pathfinder. And so we've kind of prepared some that we thought might be worth talking about, and why we think it might be a good fit for kids. So why don't we do that? Dan, why don't you start?
Okay. Bearing in mind that I know nothing about children.
Right, yeah.
The first thing that I thought of was...
you and your wife are
stridently
not having kids, right?
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's none of us have any, really, we probably have no business talking about what's good for kids.
No.
Yeah, we all have no, business.
I think kids would get a lot out of my life with Master, actually.
Exactly right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's a harsh world out there, and the earlier they learn it, the better. So I think that games about abusive relationships are really good for kids.
You'll learn it now.
Yeah. Also, I think in addition to My Life with Master, Microscope would possibly be a good choice for kids because one of the things you mentioned, Kristen, was like limited attention spans being an issue. Yeah. And at least with Microscope, you can kind of like you're building the history of this world, right? But it's on a really long time period where anything can happen. So you don't necessarily have to be like keeping track of the narrative through the course of the game, right? So like anything you think of that's cool, you can sort of drop in and and it'll work, right? So that was my first thought.
Yeah, I can actually, honestly, I wish there had been a thing like Microscope around when I was getting my second ed D&D stuff going, like when I was a kid. Like I would have loved to have had something like Microscope, like to sort of have a foundation for, just so listeners know, it's a history world creating game. We've talked about it before on episode, 9. I'm just making that up.
Episode C.
Yeah, exactly. Whichever episode it was. And, so I think that, I can see that. Like, but, for the kids who are really, really deeply into it and like want to like take their campaign to the next level, or they want, or they want to really like, kick it up, in terms of like the lore or whatever. I could totally see that. Yeah.
And that can even lead into like a 4E campaign or something.
Absolutely. So, yeah. Or you could just do it as a like, again, well, not again, but I think Microscope would be a terrific classroom exercise for a teacher, right? Like that'd be kind of cool, right? Like a history teacher, like, let's make an alternate history or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. But
we don't do that in AP World History. We only have time for things as they actually happened, or at least how the winners would like us to think they happened.
Indeed, yes. well, in Texas, we already do alternate history, don't we?
Absolutely.
That's true. Yeah.
Did you hear that they renamed the slave trade this last week?
What is it?
It's no longer the Atlantic slave trade. It's now the Atlantic triangular trade. Now, triangular trade was a term
that was a thing, yeah, right.
It already absolutely existed.
But they took the word slave out.
They did. Yeah. In textbooks, they want from now on in textbooks for it not to be called the slave trade at all.
Wow.
And to only be called the Atlantic triangular trade.
Wow.
Apparently, that this was decided to deal with the overwhelming liberal bias in textbooks and among educators.
Right. Yes. Texas is a very special state, y'all.
Yeehaw.
Okay, well, so Microscope, I think it's a good choice. Kristen, do you have one that you want to talk about?
I think that they'd really enjoy Lady Blackbird.
Lady Blackbird,
I think it's got enough role-playing components. Like, you get to do the story and you've got a character, which Microscope's really great for setting up a world, but you don't get that character component. So I think that Microscope, as you said, would be great for sort of setting up a world for them to play in. But Lady Blackbird's got actual characters, but they're pre-gen. So you could have kids who are thinking about trying it out step up and say, here's a character that's already made for you.
Not tons of investment of time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why don't you try it out? And that this might be a good way of getting some new membership in.
Well, and it's also basically just Star Wars.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the great thing about Lady Blackbird. The reason why Lady Blackbird makes and sings every time is because it's just Star Wars, right? Essentially,
but it's the old Star Wars.
It's steampunk Star Wars.
Do kids know old
true,
Star Wars?
Yes.
Oh, can we talk about David for a minute? David, who's been on the show a couple times. David, I was having some story about like how, like I remember the first movies I saw were like E.T. and like Return of the Jedi or and David like made a legit to him comparison of like, oh, it's like when I first saw Phantom Menace. I was like, oh boy. Anyway, sorry. There are people younger than me, I guess, in the world, but
I know. It's so weird, though.
It's so weird. I know. It's the worst. Okay. Yeah, Lady Blackbird, I agree. Yeah, like a steampunk Star Wars. And then the characters are pre-made. There's no need to, the kids can just try it out, see if they like it, not have to like spend a bunch of time making characters.
Oh, and the other thing is that they're all student run, so they have student DMs. And Lady Blackbird is something that not completely inexperienced, but fairly new to DMing, that people can use that. They can find it really accessible. I know Scott ran Lady Blackbird and he'd only played it the once and felt really comfortable running it.
And he didn't have a lot of experience with role-playing games,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So I think that, in that way, it's really good for kids to pick up too.
Cool. Well, the game I was going to throw out there was The Quiet Year by Avery McDaldno. We've talked about that before, and most of our listeners, I'm sure, know The Quiet Year. It's well known, but it is a game in which you are not telling the stories of individual characters. You're telling the story of a community in strife. It's a community that's trying to rebuild after a post-apocalyptic disaster. and you're drawing a map, and you have like these events that happen. You draw these cards, and there's like these events of like people wandering into town, and you have to deal with those people, or like, different, like there are like different tensions within the community that you have to cope with. And you're not allowed to talk openly. That's why it's called the quiet year. You have to you have a very ritualized manner in which you can discuss things about the community. And I thought that would be, I always think whenever I play it, like this would be really great for like young people to play. It'd be really neat for them to it'd be a great way of experiencing like communities in strife, communities like where there are tension, how to like build consensus. How does it feel when like one section of the community is disagreeing with something that you want to do and you have no power to stop it? Like, how do you continue operating within that community? A lot of like, I don't know, just sort of like civic engagement.
It would
sort
also
of things.
be amazing for my room to be quiet at lunchtime.
Yes, right, yeah.
That'd be amazing, 'cause they're there 4 days out of 5.
Yeah.
The only day that they're not there is because debate club is there. So.
Wow.
And Dan led us in playing a skin of that game, and the name's escaping me at the moment.
Forest.
The Deep Forest.
Yeah.
I think that would also go over really well. That if they liked the Quiet Year, they would probably also like the Deep Forest.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, that was good. That was a great topic. Let's go on to listener feedback. All right, it's time for listener feedback. So, listeners may recall that we are running a contest right now. The contest is you were to post your story about your very first role-playing game experience on Google+, and we were going to choose the one we liked best, and the winner would get a free copy of Into the Odd. We have one of our members, Steven, who has generously donated his extra copy. So that was the contest. We can't decide which one we liked best. They're all pretty good. We received about a dozen entries. We're not sure. I don't know. We all just sat here, we read them all, and we could not come to a conclusion. So we're going to handle it like good gamers. We are going to roll a die, a D12 to choose. There's actually only 11. So if we roll a 12, I'll roll again. And we're going to choose that way. and the winner, you will get, we will make arrangements with you for the book. And we're also going to read your submission, right now. So how are we going to do this, Dan? Shall I just roll the die?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a tradition in RPG podcasts to loudly roll dice into the microphone, right?
Right. That's true. Yeah. Well, we haven't done that yet, but
well, that's true because we don't do APs, so we'll never get a chance.
Yeah. So
we don't do it right now.
This is our chance because we don't do APs. This is our chance to loudly roll dice into the microphone. Okay. So, we've got 12 or 11 entries. Sorry. And I'm going to roll. And if I get a 12, I'm going to roll again. Here we go. Crap.
And it falls off the table. So.
All right. It rolled 12. Hold on. Let's see who that is. Okay, so it appears our winner is... That's my drum roll.
That's good.
Is that pretty good?
Yeah. Very nice.
Listener... Oh, I'm going to get this wrong. It's either listener Jan or listener Jan. I'm not sure which. I've never met this person in person.
Please say it's Jan.
I think it might be listener Jan. But if it's Jan, I apologize, listener Jan. But we're saying listener Jan. So you're the winner. Congratulations. We'll make arrangements to get that book to you. In the meantime, here is your anecdote. Would one of you guys like to read it?
Sure.
Dan? I've been talking a lot. Why don't you read it?
As a board gamer, I had always been aware of D&D, but never gotten interested in it. The bulky books looked like too much to get into, and I wasn't going to convince anyone to join in, nor did I know where to look for others. I didn't look into RPGs because of that. Somehow, at some point, though, I found myself in possession of a copy of Fiasco. I was interested in story-centered card/board games and stumbled upon it. Where card-based story games had their limitations, Fiasco seemed to offer much more. It took a while, but I found some expats to get it to the table with. Our first game was incredible. We played 2 rival video stores in a small town. One rented out Betamax tapes.
Nice.
The other was part of a chain renting VHS.
Nice.
This was taking place at the height of the Betamax VHS showdown.
Oh, yeah.
The Betamax guy's store was running like shit because he only had 10 movies or so. So he sold VHS under the counter. The guy running the chain wasn't doing much better, though. He had an inspection coming up, led to believe that the Betamax store was doing well. He wanted to steal the paperwork of that store to present to his superiors. Somehow people got killed, and the VHS chain store CEO came down to the little town. Bodies were buried in abandoned quarries, and we actually all got away with it.
I love the vague, somehow people got killed.
Yeah, that sounds like every game of Fiasco I've ever played, right?
No.
The other players were seasoned role players, but I hadn't played GMless before. I must have gotten lucky to find them because they had no problem doing some improv at the table, and a world just opened up for me. The most memorable part for me was the montage where someone said, "And this is the quarry, which is being reinstated," which meant that the bodies were going to be found, and our characters who thought they were all going to get away with it all had a nasty surprise waiting for them.
I love the end of Fiasco.
Yeah, the little aftermath scenes are good, yeah.
He says, I was completely won over. The cinematic feely ending felt awesome, and I was quite literally flabbergasted by the potential of story games. This was exactly what I've been looking for in card-based story games, but it surpassed my expectations by a mile. Ever since, I'm a believer. I don't think D&D will ever be for me, but a different story showed me that there's more to this hobby than slaying dragons and collecting loot.
Oh, awesome.
All right. Well, listener Jan, congratulations on winning. That was a very good tale. Another one of these folks who don't like the traditional fantasy stuff about role-playing games. Those odd ducks. A few of those odd ducks.
My people. I love them.
Yes. Listener Jan, you should try D&D. Well, not D&D. Try Dungeon World. Yeah.
Well, I think he said he just didn't like the crunch of the big books and all that, right?
Yeah,
so
for sure. Yeah.
He might be a dirty elf lover for all we know.
True,
Second ed isn't really heavy book-wise.
Second ed's not. Yeah, no. Second. Well, that's why that's why I left role playing games is because 3.0 was just it was too much. Like I wasn't into it, and I was like, oh god, I'm gonna go away for a little bit.
All that stuff's available online. Listener Jan, give it a try. Someone in the world is running second ed, and they would love to have you play with them.
I'd play second ed. You're a second ed gal, aren't you?
I am.
Well, while we've got you, why don't you tell us what your first role playing game experience was?
My first role playing experience was 5th grade.
Okay.
It was in my best friend's house. My best friend Kimmy. It was her house, and her dad Sam.
Kimmy Gibbler?
No, Kimmy Buser. And her dad Sam was our DM actually, and he was fantastic. He was the dad who would come around. He was a psychologist, so he had a somewhat flexible schedule, and he would come to elementary school and read stories to our classes when we were younger, and he did all the voices.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
He was very dramatic.
A Doyle GM, yeah.
Yeah, so good, so good. And so I played a mage, because magic, like what little person would not want to do magic?
You're always going to be the mage, yeah.
Right, yeah.
That's the thing. I don't think young people have a good, solid appreciation of like the thief.
Right.
Or the fighter.
Right.
Yeah.
And
They're so good.
And in my, as an adult, I'm all about the ranger. I love rangers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But no, I was
especially half elf rangers. Come on.
Yeah. So I was actually a half elf mage.
Good for you.
Named Tiger's Eye because in elementary school I was obsessed with cats. Anything that I could get a cat name into, I was obsessed. And I had a pet raccoon, and
not a cat.
No,
that seems strange.
It's a bit strange. I realize. I don't know why, but I did. I had a pet raccoon, and we played probably about every other week for a couple of months. It was really fun. And at one point, another player killed my raccoon.
Oh no!
I know it was really upsetting, and it released in me something that I didn't know I possessed. I went on this quest for vengeance.
Oh, nice!
I was after this other player for weeks after that, trying to get them. It was like my introduction to the world of PvP. Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to get vengeance for the raccoon, and I think as an adult looking back, I don't even think they knew I was like really pissed off about it, but it consumed me.
Were you passing notes to the GM that said like, I'm going to stab them first chance I get? Or...
note passing was allowed.
Yeah.
Note passing was allowed. Yeah,
has been until we outlawed it.
In the end, I think I got some petty vengeance, but it wasn't satisfying at all. But I was hooked. And then in sixth grade,
let me throw this out here. I might blow your mind here. What if this was all a psychology experiment being run on you by this guy to see how you reacted when someone killed your pet in this game?
All praise psychology then. It was great. It was so fun.
What if we told you the experiment never ended?
Exactly.
I'd believe that too.
Would you like to see your file?
No. But by 7th grade, actually, I'd made some little nerdy friends who were also socially awkward, and I was DMing. And I DM'd from 7th grade to, I guess, about our junior year.
Nice,
but we were very freeform. And I think that's the reason that I really loved second ed, was that we made it work for us, and we made it very storytelling based and very social. And so when I sit around a table playing Dungeon World, that feels like what Dungeon...
Like it
feels like second ed to me.
I've always said that. Yeah. I've always said Dungeon World feels so much like second ed. It really does. And 100% with you on that, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Good story. Awesome. Yeah, nice little coda. Good. Great. Well, that's the podcast. Thank you so much, Kristen, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Dan, thank you for being amazing, as always, with the audio engineering. Well, hopefully. We'll see how this one sounds. No, it's going to be great. 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 If you would like to get in touch with us and continue the conversation, listeners, you should definitely join our Google Plus community. You can go to the community section of Google Plus and search for The Gauntlet. We will pop right up. Join us there. Say hi. Get involved in our daily discussions about role-playing games. And if you'd like to write us an email, you can do so at gauntletpodcast@gmail.com. That's all I've got. End podcast. I thought my Bane was so good.
Oh, I know, yeah.
I thought my Bane was so good until I heard it, and I was like, what the fuck was that?
I've always loved your Bane, but...
It's not good, though. How come no one told me? How come no one was like, wow, your Bane's actually not as good as you think it is?
Because it's adorable. It's the cutest Bane voice ever. I'm practicing not looking at you when I talk to you. Who wouldn't want a little chibi Bane?
It is. It is. It's totally chibi Bane. Oh, what a tragedy.